I've been in a good mood ever since I decided today that I'm going to tell this story. I thought of this story. The story came to me in a family funeral, and I realized this is probably God, is this weird? Nah, we're Irish. I was going to save this for a funeral, but, there's no guarantees that I will get to do that. When my brother and I were kids, there was always somebody in the house fighting. Something going wrong, somebody screaming. And the only place that wasn't true was in Michigan when we were kids. We lived in Connecticut. My mother's parents had a little house on the lake, right on Lake Michigan, in this place called Good Harbor Bay. For Michiganders, we're talking about Traverse City up here in the Little Finger. If you can just imagine like a perfect sugar sand beaches that had this nice, relaxing harbor, and then the distance ended at the horizon line where it was just lake for miles. Our grandfather was this great outdoorsman, and he was a really gentle soul. He was also the only person who could get through to my my brother was a difficult person. I think there's this assumption that boys be fighting, but I fucking hated it. I hated it. There was no we're wrestling or we're having fun. My brother was a bully. And I spent most of my childhood years very alone and just trying to hide and find some place of peace. But Michigan was where I could always have peace, and it was my favorite time of the year with my family. My grandfather, whenever he would catch my brother go off on one of his little bully tirades, he wouldn't spank him or yell at him or ground him. He would pull him aside, just in a corner of a room, very quietly, and he didn't embarrass him in front of anybody. And he would say, Jay, I know your brother annoys you sometimes, but one day you're going to be older, and you'll realize that this is the most time you guys are ever going to get to spend together. And he's the only brother you're ever going to have. And it was interesting because it was the only thing that got through to him. I hate to say it like that, but it was. I mean, it wasn't teachers or our parents. It was our grandfather. When he died, I was 11, and we still had the house in Michigan. But it was when we were kids, it was this woodsy paradise and fun, and we would just run around and go to the beach and stuff, and there was a big cool motorboat, and my grandfather had this sailboat. And then as we got older, the motorboat was gone, but the neighbors would say, oh, if you want to use our little, rinky-dink sunfish, you can. And then my uncle had this crappy rowboat that he had much too big of an engine on out by the house. And so we stopped having that fun feeling as we got older. But then one day, my dad took the neighbor up on the offer, and he went out on his own at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the sailboat. I think my dad knew what he was doing, but we're not sailing folk. My mother's a worrier. She's a mother, but my mother's exceptionally good at it. So my mother is there with a pair of binoculars going, I don't see him anymore, do you? And we're Mom, come on, chill out. This is probably his only relaxing time of this entire trip. And then finally she just comes in and is I don't know where your father is anymore, and I can't see him. You guys have to go get him. So we go up, we flip over my uncle's rinky-dink rowboat, and we notch this much too big engine on it. And my mom doesn't want us both to go because then she's going to lose all of us. But then my brother notes that if they put this big engine on the boat, they need somebody to drive and someone to sit in front to keep the boat from tipping over backwards, so I have to come. So we go off, and I had that feeling. I think you know what I'm talking about. I have this feeling as soon as we get going, our mother's on the dock just should we call the Coast Guard? And we are taking off. We're we're gonna be heroes. I look back at my brother. He's got this huge grin on his face, and we're charging at this horizon line, and the sun is setting, and it's gonna be dark soon, and we don't have homing beacons, there's no GPS, this is the 90s. And my brother turns to me, and he goes, do you ever notice how the times we have the most fun together is when Dad fucks up? And I had this, 12-year-old insight on the guy for the first time. I was it's funny, he has a different relationship with my dad than I do. It's just he's the oldest. He's supposed to set the example. So when my dad comes down on him, it's coming from there. It's different than when, something happens with me. When I spill milk or something, I do it because I'm the dumb little kid. We get out there, and we can see that my dad's turtled. The sailboat has tipped over, and all you see is, the bottom of the boat tipped up. There was, I forget what it's called. It's a jib, a sailboard, some cool sailing term. You're supposed to, that falls out, and you're supposed to get it back in and lean on it to get the boat to right itself. And but this piece of shit boat was missing a little notch pin, so every time my dad would get the jib in, it would tip over again and slide out. By the time he gets it all going together and he's rescued himself, we come along. he just sees us coming. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows that our mom was like, is he that notch on the horizon? And as soon as we see him, he goes, go home, boys. Just turn right around and go home. But I remember looking back at my brother on the way home, and I knew that, like, we were going to report to mom first. Like, we were going to say, like, your husband's okay, ma'am. But we're the kids, so we're going to say, like, Dad's fine. He's on his way home now. And I turned back to my brother, and I thought again about it. Like, yeah, my brother is crass. That's how my brother looks at life. He says, Dad fucked up. We're going to have a good time. But that's still one of my favorite memories of my brother of all time. And when I look back at that, that was like a really fun thing we got to do together. We couldn't have done that if we had this like perfect seafaring Connecticut family. And that wouldn't have happened. That situation wouldn't have happened if I had this like Eagle Scout brother who was gonna like come to the rescue and always know what to do. We had that fun experience because our messed up, stupid family had to come together and could only come together that way because we're family. And on the way home, I remember thinking, that's the only brother I'm ever gonna have. And with a big smile on my face, I said for the first time, that's the only brother I could ever want.